I always believed I knew my father and my husband. They were the pillars of my life, the people I trusted unconditionally. My father, with his warm smile and comforting hugs, was my hero since childhood. He was the kind of dad who never missed a recital or a parent-teacher meeting, always there, as steady as a rock. For all the important moments in my life, my husband, on the other hand, was my first and only love. He came into my life like a breath of fresh air, bringing laughter and a sense of companionship I had never experienced before. We grew together, unraveling the mysteries of life side by side, sharing dreams, and building plans for the future. But in my quiet town, secrets have a way of coming to the surface, and my world was about to crumble. This town, with its peaceful tree-lined streets, was the perfect backdrop for an ideal family life. Here, every neighbor knows each other by name, and family stories are passed down like precious heirlooms. However, beneath this facade of a close-knit community, dark truths were hidden, ready to emerge and shake the foundations of my existence. When I began to notice changes in my father's and my husband's behavior, an unsettling feeling of doubt began to settle in my heart. They, who had always been the embodiment of stability and unconditional love, suddenly seemed like strangers to me. There was an unspoken silence, a weight in the unspoken words, and quick averted glances, small cracks that started to appear in the perfect picture I had of my family. I began to suspect something when I noticed subtle changes in my father's behavior. The man who had been the embodiment of tenderness and security all my life suddenly seemed a shadow of his former self. He, who always had a smile and a hug ready for me, now avoided my gaze and answered my questions with short, tense words. The warmth I always felt in his presence was replaced by a cold detachment, and this left me confused and worried. I decided to look at his cell phone for an explanation. Perhaps he was facing problems at work or going through some kind of personal crisis that he didn't want to share. But what I found there broke my heart and shattered the image I had of my father. Videos and messages, clearly intimate, exchanged between him and my husband. They were having an affair. Worse still, I discovered that my husband led a double life as a call boy, and my father, unbelievably, was one of his clients. My father had fallen in love with him. My world, which until then had seemed secure and stable, collapsed in a matter of seconds. I couldn't believe it. The betrayal was so deep, so personal, that it left me breathless. My father and my husband, the two people I trusted the most, had deceived me in a way I could never have imagined. I felt betrayed, not just as a wife, but as a daughter, disgusted by the lie that was unfolding right under my nose, and furious. So furious that every thought was consumed by the fire of that anger. I was faced with a fragmented reality, where every happy memory I had shared with my father and my husband was now tinged with the suspicion of a lie. The shared laughter, the moments of complicity, everything seemed like a sham. I wondered how long this had been going on, and how I could have been so blind as not to see the signs. The pain of discovery was almost unbearable, a weight I carried on my chest, suffocating me with every breath. I determined that the truth had to be known. By exposing them on social media, I showed the world who my father and husband really were. This relationship hit me like a thunderbolt, leaving me in a state of shock and disbelief. I felt betrayed in a way I had never imagined possible. Disgusted to the core of my being, the humiliation I felt was unbearable. I wanted them to feel the pain and shame I was going through. In an impulsive rage, I channeled my fury into my husband's car with each hammer blow. I felt a cathartic release, even though I knew it wouldn't erase the pain and betrayal I felt. Every broken pane of glass, every dent in the bodywork was a silent cry from my wounded soul, an echo of the betrayal that tore my life apart. What happened next was a blur. My father, blinded by anger and jealousy, completely lost his mind. He, who had always been the rock of our family, turned into a storm of fury and despair. His pain, fueled by forbidden passion and the collapse of his double life, drove him out into the streets of our neighborhood. There, in front of the astonished gazes of the neighbors, who had known him for years, he created a riot, a spectacle of pain and rage that broke the calm of the afternoon. In a final act of madness, which seemed more like a desperate cry than a thought-out action, my father set fire to my husband's car. The flames, fueled by his fury, rose high, illuminating his contorted face. It was as if the flames reflected the insanity of his mind. A mind now consumed by forbidden love and uncontrollable jealousy. The flames danced in his eyes, and for a moment, I saw in him a man I had never met before, someone pushed to the limit, unable to deal with the complexity and pain of his feelings. The neighbors, who until then had seen him as a kind and respectable man, watched in shock. They tried to contain the flames that were devouring the car, an almost impossible task given the fury of the fire. My father, in the middle of the street, was shouting incomprehensible words, his sentences interspersed with sobs and screams. It was a scene of desolation and chaos, a painful contrast to the usual serenity of our neighborhood. I, paralyzed by the scene before me, could only think about how love and passion can sometimes lead us down dark and destructive paths. I watched in horror as the neighbors, driven by fear and fury, attacked my father. He, who was once a pillar of strength and love in our community, was now on the ground, vulnerable and defenseless, surrounded by an angry mob. I wanted to scream, to beg them to stop, but the words died in my throat, choked by shock and disbelief. My heart was pounding. Every blow he received seemed to hit me too. The unbridled violence before my eyes was something I could never have imagined happening in the quiet streets of our neighborhood. The police arrived, sirens echoing through the chaos, but it was too late to save what was left of my family. The officers pushed their way through the crowd, trying to restore some order, but the damage had already been done. My father lay on the ground, a broken man, both physically and emotionally. I felt every look from the neighbors on me, some full of pity, others of judgment. The revelation of our family's dark secret had changed our lives forever. At that moment, I realized how deeply a person's actions and choices can affect those around them. The love and trust I had in my father and my husband were replaced by an emptiness and pain that I knew would take years to heal. As the police took my father away, I stood there, lost in the middle of the street, contemplating the shards of the life I once thought I knew. Now the city knows our history. The streets I once walked with joy, where every corner was a chapter of happy memories, are now tinged with the shadow of our tragedy. The colorful facades of the houses, which once smiled at me with familiarity, now seem to stare at me with a mixture of pity and reproach. With every step I take, I feel the weight of the neighbors' gazes, laden with whispers and speculation. I have lost my father, my husband, and a part of myself in this chaos. The man who taught me to ride a bike and face my fears, the man with whom I dreamed of building a future, both became strangers, characters in a nightmare that unfolded in broad daylight. And even now, as I try to put the pieces back together, I know that some truths are too heavy to carry alone. Every step forward is a challenge, a fight against the pain and resentment that consume me. Memories, once sweet, are now thorns that hurt with every touch. My home has become a maze of painful memories. I find myself lost in a whirlwind of emotions, trying to find some meaning or redemption amidst the rubble of my shattered life. In this moment of loneliness and desolation, I realize that the journey to healing and forgiveness is arduous and lonely, but deep down I hold on to the hope that, with time, the wounds will heal and that I can learn to live again. Not just as the betrayed daughter or the abandoned wife, but as someone who, despite everything, has survived and will find a new way to be happy. As the dust of the tragedy began to settle, a shocking revelation came to light, shedding new light on recent events. The protagonist of this story, who appeared to be an innocent victim of circumstance, was actually hiding her own dark secret. As the world around her crumbled, it turned out that she already knew about the illicit relationship between her father and her husband. However, this awareness was not accompanied by surprise or shock. On the contrary, it served as a convenient opportunity. Far from being the betrayed wife, who believed her world had been destroyed, she was actually involved in her own betrayal. Her infidelity with one of her husband's cousins was a secret she guarded carefully, a dangerous game of desire and deception. Fearing that her own indiscretion would be discovered, she decided to use the situation involving her father and her husband to her advantage. By exposing their affair publicly, she skillfully diverted attention away from herself, painting herself as the damaged party in a devastating family drama. The truth came out when her cousin, consumed by guilt and confusion, could no longer keep the secret. The consequences of his confession were immediate and catastrophic. The town, already shaken by the previous scandal, was shocked by the revelation. Those who had previously sympathized with the protagonist now found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about her. Sympathy quickly turned to distrust and condemnation. This surprising turn of events revealed human complexity and imperfection in a stark way. In this small community, where every life was intrinsically intertwined with that of others, secrets functioned as a complicated web of lies and betrayals. The final revelation not only revealed the protagonist's true nature, but also highlighted the fragility of appearances and how easily the truth can be manipulated. The small town, once a symbol of serenity and idyllic family life, now bore the scars of secrets revealed and trusts broken. A grim reminder that behind every tranquil facade can lurk stories that defy the perception of reality.